Today we visit the graveyard at St Nicholas's Church at Codsall in Staffordshire. The headstone reads, "In sacred memory of Francis Rex, beloved son of Stephen and Minnie Farran, born August 23rd, 1922, killed May 3rd, 1948, by a terrorist bomb. Nothing but well and fair, and what may quiet us in death so noble. John Milton. Greater love hath no man than this." Rex Farran was killed in May 1948 by a terrorist bomb, which was addressed to his brother, highly decorated British officer Major Roy Farran. It was as he lay dying from multiple injuries that the innocent victim of a terrorist bomb called for there to be no revenge for his death. The victim was 26-year-old Rex Farran, the brother of highly decorated British officer Major Roy Farran. Rex was killed in May 1948 after opening a parcel addressed to Roy, who was on holiday with friends in Scotland, after it was delivered to the family home in Codsall near Wolverhampton. His heartbroken father, Stephen Farran, would later reveal, "I was there when my son died. My boy asked that there should be no revenge, and that is how we all feel." A day after the attack branded a wicked outrage by then Home Secretary Tutor Eade, an anonymous phone call was made to the Banque de l'Union Parisienne offices in Paris. Described as being as chilling as it was remorseless, it revealed the identity of Rex's killers. Claiming to be from underground terror group the Stern Gang, the caller dictated an official statement that the purpose of the incident had been twofold. It was to punish Farran for the murder of a Jewish youth and a reply to the sending of British reinforcements to Palestine. It also warned, "Farran will pay the price," and was signed, "The War Against the British Occupation, Stern Gang." The parcel bomb was delivered around a year after the disappearance of 16-year-old Alexander Rubovitz in May 1947. Witnesses saw him being bundled into a car by a man carrying a pistol after he was caught putting up posters celebrating fighters for the freedom of Israel, more widely and more accurately known as the Stern Gang. Major Farran was accused of being involved in his disappearance and suspected murder. When it came to trial, the case against him was dismissed, but the Stern Gang threatened they would follow him to the end of the world. Officers from Scotland Yard, headed up by Superintendent Tom Barrett, an expert on Jewish terrorism, searched the bomb-shattered family home. The investigation, which also discovered fragments of the remains of poignant lines from Shakespeare's plays Henry IV and Henry V, including references to rebels and rebellion, concluding the bomb was probably made in Paris and then posted on to London. Superintendent Barrett said, "We have a definite idea whom we are after now, but ideas don't get your man." However, the trail to the killers went cold. A jury later returned a verdict that Rex was feloniously killed by some person or persons unknown. In a statement, the Wolverhampton Jewish community said, "We cannot too strongly disassociate ourselves from the acts of terrorists who have learnt their methods in Hitler's Europe." The murder remains unsolved, the crime file still open. That is a brief outline of the story behind the killing of Francis Farran, known by his middle name of Rex. To tell the story, we must travel back to 1947 and firstly look how the newspapers covered the story. The first article covering the story appears on the 18th of June 1947. Police chief extradited, faces charge. Major R. Farran, 26-year-old Assistant Superintendent of Palestine Police, who was extradited from Syria yesterday, was under arrest in Jerusalem today on a serious charge. An official statement by the Palestine government said the charge related to the disappearance on May the 6th this year of Alexander Rubovitz, a 17-year-old Jew. Rubovitz's relatives were told by a high-ranking police officer in Jerusalem yesterday, "We've been unable to trace the missing youth." Major Farran holds a number of decorations for wartime gallantry, including the DSO. The next newspaper article is from the 20th of June 1947 and reads, "DSO Major escapes in Jerusalem. Friday. Major Roy Alexander Farran, DSO, Triple Military Cross, Croix de Guerre and Legion of Merit, 26-year-old Palestine police officer escaped during the night from an army barracks in Jerusalem where he was being detained. It was officially stated early today. Major FARRAN, who comes from Histons Hill in Codsall, Staffordshire, is a Royal Marines Commando officer second to the Palestine police. It was officially announced last night that he was being charged under the Army Act in connection with the disappearance of a 17-year-old Jew, Alexander Rubovitz. He was extradited from Syria on Tuesday and charged the same day. An identification parade was held in Jerusalem on Wednesday night, but Major FARRAN was not identified by any witnesses of the incident when Rubovitz was forced into a car by a man in plain clothes, the statement said. Major FARRAN was one of 3 Palestine police officers held in Damascus after arrest by the Syrian authorities nearly 2 weeks ago. The Stern Gang on Thursday formally described Rubovitz as one of its members and demanded that the police announce his whereabouts. On the 21st of June 1947, newspapers report that Major FARRAN had escaped from where he was being held. Dogs in hunt for Major. Dogs are taking part in a countrywide hunt by troops and police for a 26-year-old Major Roy FARRAN, Assistant Superintendent of Palestine Police, who escaped from Allenby Barracks in Jerusalem by climbing through a window. He had been on a serious charge in connection with the disappearance on May the 6th of a 17-year-old Jew, Alexander Rubovitz, who was never found. British authorities have asked police of 2 neighbouring countries to cooperate in the search, and all frontier controls were alerted immediately the escape became known. Military and police searchers were told to look out for a man of 5 foot 8 inches in height, of blonde colouring and speaking with an Irish accent. Major FARRAN, DSO, Triple Military Cross, Croix de Guerre and Legion of Merit, Royal Marines Commando officer seconded to the Palestine police, is from Histons Hill in Codsall. FARRAN was on the run for 10 days until he finally surrenders, as this article from the 30th of June 1947 describes. Major Roy Alexander FARRAN, Palestine police officer and ex-commando, who gave himself up after escaping from Allenby Barracks here 10 days ago, was today being held in Sarafand containment to face trial by court-martial on the charge connected with the disappearance of Alexander Rubovitz, 17-year-old Jew, on the May 6th. Weekend attacks on British soldiers followed a Stern Gang threat of reprisals for the disappearance of Rubovitz. The United Nations Special Committee on Palestine issued a statement condemning the terrorist activity, which in the last 48 hours has resulted in the death of 4 British Army men and the wounding of 6 others. No actual mention was made of the British dead and wounded, but sympathy was expressed with Mr. Alan Major, assistant to the Palestine Government liaison officer, who was recently attacked by terrorists. The next update comes from the 9th of August 1947. Holding charge of murder against FARRAN. Major Roy Alexander FARRAN, who was arrested on charges relating to the disappearance from a Jerusalem street early last May of a 16-year-old Jewish suspect, is detained on a holding charge of murder pending a decision on further action, it was officially stated last night. A holding charge, a War Office official explained last night, is a provisional charge which may be altered, added to or dropped, and which is preferred against the soldier pending thorough investigation of the circumstances. The spokesman added that the charge was a purely military one and did not apply in civil courts. Major FARRAN, whose home is at Codsall, Wolverhampton, is 26, and during the war gave distinguished active service in support of European resistance movements, for which he was awarded the DSO, the Croix de Guerre and Military Cross. At the time of his arrest, he was Assistant Superintendent of Palestine Police. He escaped from close arrest in Allenby Barracks, Jerusalem, and later surrendered. When told at Codsall last night to the holding charge against his son, Mr. FARRAN said, "My son has written me that his conscience is absolutely clear." Since the arrest of Major FARRAN, scores of sympathetic letters have been arriving at his parents' home. Earlier yesterday, the Palestine Supreme Court had rejected an order Nisi calling on Major FARRAN and senior police officers to show cause why they should not produce the body of Rubovitz. We then hear nothing until the 24th of September. Captain FARRAN court-martial fixed. Jerusalem, Wednesday. Captain Roy Alexander FARRAN will be tried by a general court-martial for the murder of Alexander Rubovitz on October the 1st, it was officially announced today. Captain FARRAN held the rank of Major and had been seconded to the Palestine police when 16-year-old Rubovitz, presumed to have been a Stern gang member, disappeared on a Jerusalem street on May the 6th. After 21 days suspension from duty during his arrest, Captain FARRAN was automatically reduced in rank. The trial opens 1st of October 1947. Troops of the Royal Suffolk Regiment today guarded the military court buildings in Jerusalem, where Captain Roy Alexander FARRAN, DSO Military Cross, accused of the murder of a 16-year-old Jewish boy, Alexander Rubovitz, appeared before a general court-martial. Police armoured cars equipped with two-way radios stood by the inn-yard below the tiny courtroom. Bren gunners were in position on rooftops surrounding the building. Tommy gunners were behind sandbags at every window. Security measures, normally very strict for military court trials, were tightened up. Everybody entering the court was searched for arms, and the 40 pressmen and women covering the trial, British, US, French, Jewish and Arab, were searched for cameras and credentials were triple-checked. Captain FARRAN, former Assistant Superintendent of the Palestine Police, joined the British Army when he was 19. He fought with resistance forces in Belgium, France, Germany, Burma and Greece and was wounded 4 times. A short, stocky figure wearing 2 rows of decorations and the bright red hat of the 3rd King's Own Hussars, Captain FARRAN came smartly to attention and said not guilty in a quiet voice. Mr. Maxwell Turner, prosecuting counsel, who flew from Britain a few hours before the trial, said that Rubovitz was last seen on the night of May the 6th being chased by a man, caught and hustled into a saloon car. In the course of this, the man lost his hat. On May the 13th, the hat was found near this spot. On the sweatband were written the letters F-A-R, then a blank, then the letters A-N. He returned to Palestine on June the 17th and was arrested on June the 19th. He escaped from the bar of the officers' mess and was free for 10 days before he surrendered. Nathaniel Rubovitz, a brother of Alexander, said he last saw his brother on May the 6th after Alexander left his parents' house in Jerusalem. On May the 14th, I went to a synagogue where I met a man called Mr. Kaminsky. He gave me a hat which I bought at Mani Yehuda police station. The prosecution produced a grey felt hat with a dark band and offered it in evidence. The court adjourned for the production of a photograph of Alexander Rubovitz, the missing youth. When it resumed, prosecuting counsel produced a small photograph which Jakob Rubovitz identified as being the picture of his brother. 13-year-old Jakob Jakobson, a Jewish boy, told the court that he saw a youth about 16 or 17 being chased by another man in the Jewish district of Rehavia in Jerusalem. He described the pursuer as a man wearing tennis shoes, slacks and an army-type shirt. Asked if he would be able to identify the pursuer, Jakobson said, "I may be." The court adjourned for 2.5 hours. After hearing 3 prosecution witnesses, including 2 13-year-old Jewish boys who testified that they saw a man kidnapped in Rehavia on May the 6th and hustled into a waiting taxi, there is a total of 29 witnesses, 17 for the prosecution and 12 for the defence. The trial continued the next day, the 2nd of October 1947. Colonel silent about talk with Captain FARRAN. Colonel Bernard Ferguson, Assistant Inspector General of the Palestine Police, refused to testify yesterday against Captain Roy Alexander FARRAN. When Mr. Maxwell Turner, prosecutor, asked Colonel Ferguson about details of the conversation the Colonel said he had with Captain FARRAN early in May, Colonel Ferguson replied, "I'm not prepared to answer that question because it might possibly incriminate me." After legal arguments, the Judge Advocate General, Mr. Milford Stevenson, KC, observed that under English law, Colonel Ferguson was not bound to answer. The President of the Court, Brigadier R.H. Maxwell, then told Colonel Ferguson that he was free to withdraw. Colonel Ferguson left the courtroom. 3 witnesses called by the prosecution yesterday, teenage Jews identified from a photograph Alexander Rubovitz as the man they saw being chased in the Rehovot district of Jerusalem on May the 6th, caught by his pursuer and forced into a taxi. Cross-examined by Defence Counsel Mr. A. Fernley Whittingstall, Mr. R.W. Sims, Deputy Superintendent of the Palestine Police, stated that none of these witnesses had identified FARRAN in an identification parade as the man who chased the Jew. Mr. Maxwell Turner had told the court that Rubovitz was last seen on the night of May the 6th being chased by a man. He was caught and hustled into a saloon car. The man lost his hat. Sergeant Robert Wood told the court that the search for Rubovitz's body was still going on. Police Sergeant William Faulkner, one of FARRAN's squad, said early in June FARRAN came to him and said he had been let down by his superior officers and he was going to Syria. I considered it my duty to accompany him there, Faulkner said. Sergeant Faulkner added that he and Constable Henry Carson went with Captain FARRAN to Syria, where they stayed for 6 days before returning to Palestine. Captain FARRAN remained in Syria. The trial will be resumed today. What was said in the conversation between Colonel Ferguson and FARRAN we will discover later on. On the same date, the newspaper reported the verdict. Captain FARRAN freed. Captain Roy Alexander FARRAN, DSO, Military Cross, was freed by a Jerusalem court-martial today, the court ruling that there was no case to answer. He had pleaded not guilty to the murder of a 16-year-old Jew, Alexander Rubovitz. Captain FARRAN's counsel told the court that in the history of criminal law in Britain for the last 200 years, no accused person had ever been convicted of murder or manslaughter in the absence of the body or part of the body. The prosecutor agreed that on the evidence submitted, Captain FARRAN had no case to answer. On the next day, the 3rd of October 1947, the press speak to FARRAN's family. Mrs. FARRAN waits for her son. In her home at Histons Hill, Codsall near Wolverhampton, Mrs. Minnie FARRAN is calmly awaiting the return of her 26-year-old son, Captain Roy Alexander FARRAN of the Palestine Police, who was yesterday freed by a Jerusalem court-martial on a charge of murdering a 16-year-old Jew. During the whole of his military career, in which he has undertaken a number of secret and dangerous missions and picked up a DSO and treble military cross and other decorations, Captain FARRAN and his mother have always kept in close contact. We write to each other every week, Mrs. FARRAN told a reporter today, and our letters have kept up all through the last terrible few months. I don't suppose they will keep him in Palestine now that the court-martial is over. I never doubted for one moment what would be the result, and I am waiting with joy to see him again. After his acquittal, FARRAN returned to England. The next we hear is from the 17th of October 1947. Jews seek a warrant for Captain FARRAN. An application for a warrant of arrest against Captain Roy Alexander FARRAN, acquitted a fortnight ago by a general court-martial in Jerusalem of a charge of the murder of a 16-year-old Jewish youth, Alexander Rubovitz, was reiterated before the Jerusalem Magistrates' Court today. The magistrate's decision was postponed until next Wednesday, when several eyewitnesses of the alleged kidnapping preceding the boy's disappearance are due to be heard by the magistrate, Dr. G. Stoltz. Jakob Rubovitz, one of Alexander Rubovitz's 2 elder brothers, gave evidence on what he knew of the alleged kidnapping and what others had reported to him. Mr. G. Nokomowski, the lawyer acting for the Rubovitz family, maintained that according to the Fugitive Offenders Act of 1881, the British Commonwealth is a legal entity as far as criminal procedure is concerned, and that a warrant for arrest issued in Palestine is enforceable in England. The magistrate dismissed part of the brothers' evidence as almost hearsay and therefore insufficient for a warrant for arrest to be issued now. Captain Farran arrived in this country this week, and intensive security measures were taken when he landed at Liverpool. A newspaper report on the 22nd of October 1947 adds a few more details. Warrant for arrest of Captain Farran. Told that a warrant had been issued in Jerusalem today for the arrest of his son on a charge of abducting a Jewish youth, the father of 26-year-old Captain Roy Farran said, "I have not heard from Captain Farran. I have not seen him." Two Jewish youths called as prosecution witnesses at the court-martial told the magistrate who issued the warrant today that they had identified Captain Farran as the man seen hustling Rubovitz into a taxi in the Rehavia district of Jerusalem on May the 6th. Captain Farran's home is at Codsall near Wolverhampton. It is learned at the Colonial Office that unless and until the Palestine government make formal application to extradite Captain Farran, no action will be taken in Britain. Any such application would have to be transmitted through the Colonial Office to the appropriate authorities. This article is interesting as it states that the two witnesses say that they did identify Captain Farran as the man who bundled Rubovitz into the taxi, whereas the article covering his court-martial states that they could not identify the man as Farran. We now move on to the 31st of October 1947. Farran receives revenge threats. Two anonymous threats of revenge have been received by post at his Codsall near Wolverhampton home by Captain Roy Farran, who was recently acquitted by a Palestine court-martial of a charge of murdering a Jew. Each bore a London E1 postmark and consisted of an envelope in which were stuck letters from newspaper headlines to form the Hebrew for revenge. Though neither Captain Farran nor his parents are worried by the threats, the officials responsible for his security insist on his informing the Chief Constable of any police area in which he stays. Interviewed by the Birmingham Gazette last night when he was in London to receive at the US Ambassador's House the American Legion of Merit for meritorious service in northern Italy, Captain Farran would not discuss the events leading up to his court-martial. He disclosed, however, that while in prison awaiting trial, he wrote a book which has been accepted for publication, telling of his wartime adventures as an underground fighter and of events preceding his trial. Captain Farran added that his leave from the army finishes in December and there was no question of my resigning, but if eventually I decided to end my military career, I shall go to East Africa as manager for a bush clearing firm. A month later, on the 22nd of November 1947, it seems Captain Farran has had a change of mind. Captain Farran resigns. Captain Roy Farran, DSO and Triple Military Cross, is to resign his army commission, states the Press Association. His request to the War Office to be allowed to do so has been approved. Captain Farran, whose home is at Codsall near Wolverhampton, was recently acquitted by a Palestine court-martial of a charge of murdering a Jewish youth. Aged 26, Farran served with the Special Air Service during the war and was later seconded to the Palestine Police. In prison in Palestine, he wrote a book, Winged Dagger, a reference to the shoulder flash of the Special Air Service. In Farran's mind, it must have seemed that he had done the right thing, and what happened was in the past and dealt with. That was until the 3rd of May 1948. Bomb sent to Farran, kills brother. Arrived in a book of plays. Parcel posted in Britain. A parcel bomb enclosed in a copy of Shakespeare's plays and addressed to Captain Roy Farran today killed his younger brother Rex when he opened the parcel at his home at Codsall near Wolverhampton. The bomb arrived within 3 days of the anniversary of the disappearance of the Jewish youth group Rubovitz, of whose murder Captain Roy Farran was acquitted in Palestine. The parcel, which was posted in Britain, was delivered at 8:10 a.m. to the Farrans' home at Histons Hill, Codsall. The bomb exploded when Mr. Farran, who was 26, opened it. He was rushed to hospital with multiple injuries, particularly to the stomach. The bomb had been secreted inside the volume, which had been cut away to contain it. The explosion blew out the glass from the dining room windows, and Mr. Farran was the only person in the house who was up when the explosion occurred. Another brother and his grandmother were in bed at the time. His parents and a second brother were out. Mr. Farran's parents went to his bedside at the Royal Hospital where he was admitted. Captain Farran, who had been staying in Scotland, hurried home to Codsall when told the news. Rex Farran was a draftsman employed by Bolton Paul of Wolverhampton. Assistant Commissioner R.M. Howe, who's in charge of crime at Scotland Yard, called a special conference and decided to send Superintendent Tom Barrett, CID, Inspector Burgess, CID, and Sergeant G. Baker of the Special Branch to Wolverhampton immediately. It was stated at Staffordshire Divisional Police Headquarters the officers were now making inquiries at Mr. Farran's home, and these were expected to take some time. 4th of May 1948. Rex died to save Brother Roy from revenge bomb. When Captain Roy Farran, acquitted of murdering a young Jew in Palestine, began to receive letters threatening his life, his younger brother Rex made a resolve. Since, as he thought, Roy had got too used to danger during the war to be sufficiently careful, he himself would open all parcels addressed to Roy. Yesterday, while Roy was away studying engineering in Scotland, a parcel arrived for him at the family home in Codsall. Rex took it from the hand of Eileen Hayes, the postwoman. The address was typewritten, and the parcel seemed to contain a heavy book. As he walked through the kitchen, 26-year-old Rex cut the string. A moment later there was a loud explosion, and the third brother, Keith Farran, ran downstairs to find Rex dying and the kitchen wrecked. Last night, Superintendent Tom Barrett and Inspectors George Baker and Percy Burgess from Scotland Yard, helped by an explosive expert and post office detectives, had established these facts. The parcel contained a volume of Shakespeare's plays, hollowed out to contain a block of explosive and a detonating mechanism, and the parcel was handed in at St Martin's le Grand General Post Office, London, on Saturday morning, and lay at Wolverhampton Main Post Office during Sunday, and yesterday morning was taken out by the mail van with other parcels to Codsall for delivery. Last night, Captain Roy Farran went home from Scotland by special aeroplane as soon as he was told of his brother's death. Thursday is the anniversary of the disappearance of Alexander Rubovitz, whom Roy Farran was acquitted of killing. Among lines of inquiry being pursued by the police is the possibility that the bomb was smuggled ashore from a ship for posting, or that Stern Gang or other agents have been introduced specially into the country to execute vengeance. Special branch officers are investigating the possibility that a known terrorist agent, an expert in bomb making who was recently released from prison on the continent, may have been responsible. But whoever was responsible, it is believed that when thousands of holidaymakers left this country on Saturday after the removal of the ban on visiting foreign countries, the agents or agent left as well. From the same date, CID probe Farran outrage. Extra police mount guard on home. Scotland Yard officers in London were busy last night trying to establish if the parcel bomb addressed to Captain Roy Farran, which exploded and killed his 26-year-old brother Rex, reached Britain in a ship from a foreign port and was handed to a sympathiser here or posted by a member of the ship's crew. They are re-examining a recently compiled dossier of suspected Stern Gang agents in Europe and keeping in close touch with continental police about persons suspected of Jewish terrorist activities. Roy Farran, former Special Service officer and Palestine policeman, arrived home from Scotland last night and slipped in unseen by a back entrance. The parcel intended for Captain Farran contained a bomb enclosed in a hollowed copy of Shakespeare's plays, and it was delivered yesterday morning at his home at Histons Hill, Codsall, Wolverhampton, by postwoman Miss Hayes. The bomb exploded when Rex Farran opened the parcel in the absence of his brother, and he received multiple injuries, and he died 2 hours later. Thursday is the anniversary of the disappearance of a 16-year-old Jew, whom Captain Farran was acquitted of murdering in Palestine nearly a year ago. Last October, Stern Gang leaflets saying, "Captain Farran's time will come, we shall go after him to the end of the world," were pasted on walls in Tel Aviv. FARRAN has recently received 2 letters threatening him with death, and each bore a London postmark. 6 miles away in Wolverhampton, extra police went on special uniformed and plainclothes duty after rumours of anti-Jewish demonstrations, but nothing unusual was reported. The FARRAN home was guarded by police outside and in, and onlookers were moved on. So far, we have not seen any of the debris of the parcel, so we cannot yet tell if the postmark has been destroyed. It was an ordinary parcel going through the post in the ordinary way, and it will be very difficult to trace. Captain FARRAN leaves for a secret destination. Captain Roy FARRAN left his home at Histon Hill, Codsall, near Wolverhampton early today for a secret destination. It is not expected that he would give evidence at this afternoon's inquest on his 26-year-old brother Rex, who was killed yesterday by the explosion of a bomb in a parcel addressed to Captain FARRAN. Only evidence of identification and medical evidence was to be given at the inquest. Special precautions with all mail for the FARRAN home were taken at Wolverhampton and Codsall post offices today. No parcels or letters were delivered to the house. A strong police guard was mounted last night on the FARRAN home. FARRAN arrived from Scotland last night and entered his home secretly by a back entrance after walking across the fields. He remained with Superintendent Tom Barrett and Inspector P. Burgess of Scotland Yard, who arrived at the house earlier with Sergeant G. Baker of the Special Branch and Dr. Watson, the Home Office explosives expert. Superintendent Barrett told a reporter today, "Obviously, we must start with the parcel and try and see if we can work back from there. We don't know yet what information we should be able to get from the fragments, but we are hoping that we shall get some indication of the district in which the parcel was posted." When the police arrived today, they began a systematic search of Captain FARRAN's correspondence in the hope that they might find some clue which might lead them further in their inquiries for the person or persons who sent the killer bomb. On the same date, the 4th of May, the tragedy was discussed in the House of Commons by Mr. Oliver Stanley MP and the Secretary of State for the Home Department, Tutor Eade. Mr. Oliver Stanley asked by private notice whether the Secretary of State has any statement to make on the explosion yesterday which resulted in the death of Mr. Rex FARRAN. Mr. Eade replied, "I am sure the House will be shocked as I am by this wicked outrage and will wish to extend its sympathy to Mr. Rex FARRAN's relatives. I am unable at present to make any statement regarding the investigation by the police, and His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Explosives is being continued." Mr. Stanley asked, "May I associate my honourable and right honourable friends on this side of the House with what the Home Secretary has said about the outrage which all of us deplore? Although naturally one would not press the Home Secretary to give information which might hamper the investigation of this crime, may I ask whether the right honourable gentleman will remember that this is a matter in which the House and the country take a deep interest and will give us whatever information from time to time he feels it is possible to give?" Mr. Eade replies, "I thank the right honourable gentleman. I realise how profoundly not only the House but the country is shocked by this occurrence, and I undertake that as soon as I have any information which I can usefully give to the House without interfering with the investigations that are going on, I shall give it." An article from the 5th of May 1948 tells how threats were being sent in by post. 2 postcards reach FARRAN home, handed to Yard, new check-up ordered. 2 anonymous postcards received by the family of Mr. Rex FARRAN, who was killed by a terrorist bomb intended for his brother Captain Roy FARRAN in their Histon Hill home, were handed to Scotland Yard men today. On one was a drawing of 2 eyes. The other, which had a North Country postmark, said, "Thou shalt not kill. It is now your turn to mourn." Superintendent Tom Barrett, who's in charge of the inquiries, has ordered a national check-up of all aliens known to have anti-British feelings over Palestine, and every postmaster in the country has been asked to question his staff to find out if they can remember handling any parcel addressed to Captain Roy FARRAN. On the 7th of May 1948, the funeral of Rex FARRAN takes place. Police guard at FARRAN Memorial Service. There was a strict police guard outside the little parish church at Codsall near Wolverhampton this morning when a private memorial service to Rex Farran was attended by his family and a few close friends. No one else was allowed either inside or near the church. Mr. and Mrs. Farran, Captain Roy Farran, Raymond Farran and Keith Farran were at the service, which was conducted by the vicar, the Reverend Montague Spinney. The coffin was of plain oak inscribed Francis Rex Farran, 1923 to 1948. 6 of Rex Farran's colleagues at the aircraft factory where he worked carried the coffin to the grave. All wreaths were examined by the police before being taken to the cemetery, and a large number of special police, both uniformed and in plain clothes, were in the Codsall district from dawn. The church and churchyard was thoroughly searched by police this morning. After the funeral, the police continued their investigations, and towards the end of June 1948, the inquest into Rex Farran's death opens. On the 29th of June, the verdict is announced. Farran bomb inquest findings. The inquest on Rex Farran, who was killed on May the 4th when he opened a parcel bomb intended for his brother, Captain Roy Farran, was resumed at Wolverhampton this afternoon. Miss Eileen Hayes, auxiliary postwoman at Codsall, said she delivered a parcel addressed to Captain Roy Farran. One end was open. I thought it looked like a book, she said. It was a little heavy. I met Mr. and Mrs. Farran at the bottom of the drive, and Mrs. Farran told me to take it to the house, and I handed it to Mr. Rex Farran, and as I came away, I heard an explosion. Keith Farran, a brother, said, I heard my brother groaning. The dining room was full of smoke, and Rex was on the floor. Superintendent T. Lockley of Staffordshire CID said the bomb obviously was one which would explode on contact. There was no indication as to who had dispatched it. The verdict was that Farran was feloniously killed by some persons or person unknown. The story then goes cold until an article from the 22nd of October 1949. Police guard when Farran flies home. Protective measures are to be taken by the police when Captain Roy Farran, aged 28, arrives in Britain from southern Rhodesia next week. He was threatened with death by the Stern Gang in Palestine in 1947. A cable received yesterday by Alderman H. C. Whitehouse, chairman of the Dudley and Stourbridge Conservative Association, stated that Captain Farran expected to land at London next Wednesday. He will go to Dudley for consideration as prospective parliamentary candidate for the division. It is understood police in the Midlands have been in consultation with higher authorities and arrangements have been made for the protection of Captain Farran. A strict watch is to be kept on letters and parcels addressed to Captain Farran. In May 1948, his younger brother Rex was killed by a parcel bomb intended for Captain Farran and delivered to their home at Codsall near Wolverhampton. After this article, there are very few articles relating to the killing of Rex Farran. The last article comes from the Daily Telegraph, dated the 11th of June 2006. Major Roy Farran. Newspaper founder of Irish descent and one of the most highly decorated soldiers of the Second World War, Major Roy Farran, who died aged 85, was awarded the Distinguished Service Order, 3 military crosses, the Croix de Guerre and the American Legion of Merit. For a time he worked with the security police in Palestine, where he was accused of murder. When the charges were dropped, he went home to Britain, where his brother was killed by a letter bomb. Farran was head of a construction company in Rhodesia before heading home to stand unsuccessfully in the 1950 general election. He farmed in Herefordshire before emigrating to Canada. He also wrote a classic account of the Desert War and the Special Air Service. The son of an Irish warrant officer in the RAF, Roy Alexander Farran was born on January 2nd, 1921 in India. After attending Sandhurst, he was commissioned and posted to Egypt. He was soon in action at the Battle of Sidi Barrani. In 1941, after the Germans broke through the lines at Galatos, Farran counterattacked to retake the village, but was wounded in both legs and an arm and taken prisoner. He was awarded his first military cross. After being flown to a prisoner of war hospital in Athens, he eventually managed to crawl under the perimeter wire. Greek peasants lent him money to hire a cake in which he set course for Egypt with a mixed group of British, Australians and others. The vessel encountered severe storms and was blown off course. When it ran out of fuel, FARRAN rigged up a sail made out of blankets. After 9 days, FARRAN and his comrades were rescued by a destroyer. He was awarded a bar to his military cross. After more action in North Africa, FARRAN commanded reconnaissance patrols and sabotage operations in southern Italy. On the night of October the 27th, 1943, he led a detachment behind German lines. Over the next 5 days, his small force blew up the railway line, cut communications and destroyed enemy transport. He was awarded a second bar to his military cross. FARRAN returned to England early in 1944 and on August the 19th landed at Rennes, Brittany, to command a jeep squadron. Over the next 4 weeks, his small force destroyed 23 staff cars, 6 motorcycles, 36 trucks, a goods train and a supply dump. While about 500 enemy were killed or wounded, 7 members of the squadron were killed or wounded, 1 was missing and 2 taken prisoner. FARRAN was awarded a DSO in the name of Patrick McGinty, a pseudonym he had used since 1941. He claimed the name came from the Irish song about a goat which swallowed a stick of dynamite. When the war ended, FARRAN went to Norway to help with rounding up the Germans there. In 1946, he was awarded the Croix de Guerre. After a spell as an instructor at Sandhurst, he went to Palestine, where he ended up being arrested for murder. The case was dismissed because of lack of evidence, but a year later, FARRAN's younger brother, Rex, was killed by a letter bomb sent to the family home. After a brief spell as a quarry master in Scotland, FARRAN moved to Kenya and then Rhodesia to head a construction company. He subsequently emigrated to Alberta, where he lived for the rest of his life. He took up dairy farming at Calgary, wrote for the Calgary Herald, and in 1954 founded the North Hill News, which became the country's leading weekly newspaper. In 1961, FARRAN was elected city alderman and 10 years later a progressive Conservative member of the provincial legislature. On stepping down from politics in 1979, FARRAN became chairman of the Alberta Racing Commissions and head of the North American Jockeys Association. He was columnist for the Edmonton Journal in the 80s and a visiting professor at Alberta University from 1985 to 1989. He established the FARRAN Foundation in the French Vosges as an exchange centre for French and Canadian students, and in 1994 received the Légion d'Honneur from the French government. In 1999 he was diagnosed with throat cancer and had his larynx removed, but he mastered talking through a hole in his throat. His books included Winged Dagger, 1948, and Operation Tombola in 1960, about his wartime exploits, as well as a history of the Calgary Highlanders and several novels. Roy FARRAN married in 1950 Ruth Harvey Arden. She predeceased him and he is survived by their 2 sons and 2 daughters. That is the story of the killing of Rex FARRAN and the events leading up to it and afterwards as told in the English-speaking newspapers. While searching for Alexander Rubovitz on the internet, I found this recent article from a Jewish perspective. The Scandalous Murder of Alexander Rubovitz by Menucha Shana Levin. In 1947, a Jewish boy aged 16 was kidnapped from Jerusalem and never seen again. His alleged abductor, a British World War II hero, apparently got away with murder. A blue plaque on a stone wall in the Rachavia neighbourhood of Jerusalem seems to hold a special significance. One May evening in 1947, Alexander Rubovitz, 16, was abducted at that spot and never seen again. Aged just 16, Alexander was on a mission for the Fighters for the Freedom of Israel, known as LEHI. The group also came to be known as Stern, and that is what I shall refer to them as. This group was dedicated to ending the oppressive anti-Semitic rule of the British Mandate and to establish the Jewish state of Israel. Tall, dark-haired and quiet, Alexander's easygoing manner concealed his ardent dedication to the war waged by the Jewish underground against the British mandate in what was then called Palestine. Alexander lived in the old neighbourhood of Jerusalem with his parents and 3 siblings. He belonged to a religious youth group and front organisation for Stern. Of its 150 members in Jerusalem, about 30 were engaged in secret activity. Stern routinely used teenagers for distributing information as couriers and for transporting weapons. They were especially valuable for putting up wall posters, an essential task after Stern lost its clandestine radio station in a police raid in 1946 and lacked a newspaper to spread its message and keep the Jewish public informed. The work was risky since the teenagers were susceptible to police patrols and frequently caught, though facing less severe punishments than adults. Though the Rubovitz family sympathised with Jewish nationalism, they did not fully realise the extent of Alexander's activities until he was expelled from school. Afraid his perilous behaviour would strain their mother's frail health, his brothers tried to persuade him to leave Stern. However, Miriam Rubovitz surprisingly encouraged Alexander by affirming, "He has to go. They're all going now. He has to go and succeed." Abandoning further schooling, Alexander woke before dawn to meet the 9 of the boys in his group and plaster Stern messages all over Jerusalem. In the spring of 1947, when the struggle between the British and the Jewish resistance intensified, their work grew increasingly dangerous. One May evening, Alexander headed for a mission in the centre of Jerusalem. After passing through the crowded Shuk market, he reached the leafy suburb of Rechaviah. A woman standing on her apartment balcony noticed a teenage boy running down the street. From a high vantage point, she could distinctly see the youth, who she later identified as Alexander, chased by a hefty, fair-haired man. Soon his powerful pursuer caught him near the intersection of Ushikin and Keren Kamat Israel Street. 2 young boys saw the man forcing Alexander into a waiting car. Though he struggled so furiously it required the assistance of another man emerging from the car to push Alexander into the back seat. Maya Cohen, aged 15, also observing the struggle, courageously walked over to the car and inquired who they were. The man replied in perfect English that he was a police officer, indicating his police identification certificate, then threatened to shoot Maya with his revolver. Maya heard a shout in Hebrew from inside the car. "I'm from the Rubovitz family." He glimpsed Alexander in the back seat, being hit repeatedly across the head. The door slammed shut, and Maya watched helplessly as the car drove away. The 2 young boys who also witnessed the abduction found a man's hat which had fallen to the sidewalk during the struggle. Inside the hat was the name of its owner, Roy FARRAN. Alexander had been seized by an undercover police squad led by British Major Roy FARRAN, a known Arab sympathiser. His squad was one of 2 covert units charged with penetrating the Jewish underground. They showed little restraint, and public documents suggest they tortured suspects. Taking the boy to a deserted area outside Jerusalem, possibly near Jericho, his abductors hoped he would reveal the names of influential Stern members. Bravely, Alexander refused to talk. Later, FARRAN admitted to his commanding officer, Colonel Bernard Ferguson, that he had smashed the boy's head repeatedly with a rock until he died. Leaving the article for a moment, this is possibly the conversation Colonel Ferguson refused to give details of at FARRAN's court-martial. There was an investigation by the Palestine police force, and FARRAN's hat found at the scene of the abduction was used as evidence. FARRAN was arrested, though Alexander's body was never found. After FARRAN fled custody twice, a court-martial acquitted him in the grounds that without a body, murder could not be proved. In October 1947, the entire investigation file was burnt by the British authorities in Palestine, which may have been an officially sanctioned cover-up. A book, Major FARRAN's Hat, by British historian David Cesarani, describes this entire story in vivid detail. Though the FARRAN affair is now a footnote in history, it was a factor in Britain's decision to divest itself of its mandate in Palestine. It further increased tensions between the Jewish people living there and the British. A few weeks after FARRAN's acquittal, British troops were removed. In May 1948, 1 year after Alexander's murder, the Jewish state of Israel was established, for which this brave young man had given his life. Attempts by the Lubavitch family to bring FARRAN to justice through criminal and civil proceedings were unfortunately futile. Stern members sent a letter bomb to FARRAN's home in England, which killed his brother instead. FARRAN repeatedly refused to discuss the abduction. A decorated, heroic figure of World War II, he later had a successful career as a newspaper publisher and politician in Canada. He died in 2006 at the age of 85, having quite possibly gotten away with murder. In addition to the blue plaque in Rehavia that marks the place of his abduction, a street in Jerusalem was named after Alexander Lubavitch. As long as his body is not found, he is still officially considered missing. To his family, he will be forever missing. Though only a small boy when his uncle Alexander was killed, Moshe Lubavitch knew who was responsible. In 1974, we travelled to Canada to try to meet with FARRAN to get any information that would lead to finding my uncle's body, but FARRAN's lawyer refused to let us see him. I only wanted to ask him where the body was buried so we could bring it to a proper Jewish grave. There's just a stone for Alexander in Mount Herzl Cemetery, and until the 1970s we didn't even have that. Our sorrow and disappointment was so great, explained Moshe Lubavitch, who named his own son after Alexander. Nearly 80 years later, there are still so many unanswered questions regarding the disappearance of Alexander Lubavitch and the involvement of Roy FARRAN. Why was a 16-year-old boy who was armed only with posters and paste snatched from the streets? Why was it stated that the two Jewish boys identified FARRAN as the man putting Lubavitch into the car, then at the court-martial it was stated that they hadn't identified him? Why was Colonel Ferguson allowed not to state what was said to him by FARRAN at the court-martial? Apparently FARRAN gave a written statement claiming he had killed the boy with a rock. Why wasn't this statement used as evidence against him? Where did that statement go? Why was all documentation regarding the case destroyed, and by whom? Was FARRAN's status as a decorated soldier a factor in him being acquitted? We will never know the answers to these questions, but what we do know is that 26-year-old Rex FARRAN sadly lost his life to a bomb intended for his brother Roy.